Hey guys, what is going on? It is Brooke, or the Undead DM. I am back at it again with another video for you today. And in today's episode, I'm going to be going over the math for the class that I've been covering in the past couple videos now, the Pugilist. Now, if you haven't seen the Pugilist video, I would recommend you go watch that first before continuing. And if you want, you can go ahead and watch the rest of the subclass videos for the Pugilist, in order to get my general thoughts on the class, the subclass, how it plays, and my general thoughts towards it. If you liked the video, please leave a like, and let's get started. So, the Pugilist class, in theory, should be weaker than the monk and shouldn't step on the monk's toes. And in a sense, it is and it is not. So, if we look at level 1, the Pugilist and the monk obviously have some damage differences. Primarily, you will see here that the Pugilist at level 1 has an average DPR per round, or DPR, of 8.45. And that's because if we look at the Pugilist class, it starts at a D6 as opposed to the monk's D4 that it usually starts with. So right off the bat, it does have a roughly 1 point of damage difference between the two, but then over the course of 4 rounds, it does get very, very slow in terms of the monk's DPR, because you'll notice here that the monk has a DPR of 7.15 on average. And before we continue further, I will state that this is basing it off of the fact that they're using strength for the Pugilist and dexterity for the monk. Both of them at the average of a +3 or 16 to 17 if you're using point buy. So if we look here, we'll see over the course of 3 rounds at level 1, the Pugilist is beating it out by around 4 points. And we'll get to this chart over here in a second. So you'll notice here that I multiplied it by 2, and that's because both the monk and the Pugilist have an ability similar to one another, where if we go to the martial arts, when you use the attack action with an unarmed strike or monk weapon, you can make an unarmed strike as a bonus action. And the Pugilist has something similar for their fisticuffs ability, where when you use the attack action and you make only unarmed strikes, you use or attacks with Pugilist weapons, you can use a bonus action to either grapple or make one unarmed strike. So that's why it is multiplied by 2 for both of them. This is assuming that you're using both of your fists on your action and as a bonus action at level 1. Now at level 2, you'll notice that you multiply them by 3 for both cases instead of by 2, and that's because both the monk and the Pugilist get their respective points, where monk gets their key points and the Pugilist gets their moxie points. And both of them have a similar ability, where as a bonus action they could spend one of their points in order to do 2 attacks. And for the Pugilist, that's the old 1-2. And for the monk, everyone knows it's Flurry of Blows. So you take the average of a d6, which is 3.5, you add the 3 from strength, you multiply by 0.65 for the chance to hit, and then you take that and you multiply by 3, and this way you have 3 attacks, because you're using your action to attack with one fist, and then you're using your bonus action to expend 1 moxie point to do it twice more. Now, you'll notice here, at level 4, it only slightly increases, and that's because if we look at the Pugilist here, at level 4, it still has, 3 moxie points. I apologize. I was about to say something else, but I apologize. I am incorrect. So, at this point, you will notice that over the course of 3 rounds, because you can't use moxie points more than a couple of times, because at 2nd and 3rd level, you only have 2 moxie points. So realistically, this number right here should actually be lower, closer to, if we do the math just right quick, we can actually do this right here, where we would take 3.5, we would add 3, and then we would multiply it by 0.65 for chance to hit, and that's 4.225. Then we multiply that by 3 for the first turn, and that's 12.675 as we know. However, since they only get two Moxie points at levels 2 and 3, at level 2, you would actually take the 3.5, you'd actually take the calculation for level 1, since you don't have an additional Moxie point to spend on your third turn. You would actually take 12.675. You'd multiply by 2, since you're using that ability twice. But then on the third round, since you don't have an additional Moxie point to spend to do your old 1-2 again, you would just add 8.45. And, oh, I was actually correct. Cool, just wanted to double check on that. So yes, that is why the damage is lower here, but then it increases here, despite you only getting a +1 bonus to your attack roll. And yet it increases by 2, and then by roughly 10 here over the course of 3 rounds. That's because you get an additional Moxie point, so you have to calculate for not only the increase in your strength at this level for the level 4, but also for the additional Moxie point you gain at level 4, meaning now you can actually use the old 1-2 for all 3 rounds. So after this point, it is nothing but a stagnant increase, because you're just increasing your ability score. You'll also notice here at level 5 for the Pugilist, you're increasing it to a D8, so it's an average of 4.5, because that's how that works. And of course, because you're using the old 1-2, as well as at level 5, the Pugilist also gets an extra attack. You have to multiply this equation by 4, giving you 22.1 with an average DPR over 3 rounds of 66.3. And you'll also notice over here to the right on column E, you'll notice here that it actually has a different DPR than the normal Pugilist, and that's because at 5th level, the Pugilist gets an ability called Haymaker right here, where you can make all of your attacks at disadvantage, and if you hit, you deal maximum damage. So this is assuming, instead of 4.5 plus 4 times 0.65, because you're taking disadvantage on average is a decrease of 65 to roughly around 40. So instead of a 65% chance to hit, it's around 40 to 30. So you'd actually take 8 plus 4 times 0.35 or 0.4, depending on who you're asking, multiply that by 4, and that's how much DPR you're getting with disadvantage. So you can see with disadvantage, it's not actually creating much of a disparity. It's maybe 3 points of damage difference. It could be less, depending on if you want to go with the 0.35 chance to hit for each attack. This may go down to maybe like a 16, but not by it. It's not going to affect you all that much. And from then on, it just keeps going up. So right here at level 8, we're assuming you take strength again, so you have a +5. And it goes up to 24.7 DPR, and it goes up to 74.1 DPR over 3 rounds. And then at level 11, your die goes up to a D10, so that increases your DPR to 27.3, and then your overall DPR over 3 rounds to 81.9. And then if we go all the way down here, doesn't matter what you do with your level 12 ability score, because there's not really any unarmed feats that affect your punches, except for Tavern Brawler, but at this point Tavern Brawler is just not that useful because your unarmed strikes are weaker. Your unarmed strikes are stronger than the Tavern Brawler can offer. Apologies. So if we go to the last meaningful damage increase, that is at level 17 when you get a D12, and that increases your DPR to 29.9 for the first round, and then you multiply that by 3, so you get an average DPR of 17 and above of 89.7 damage over the course of 3 rounds, because you're using your old 1-2 each time. Now if we go over to the monk, you'll notice here that the DPR in the first round isn't that far off. So at level 1, it's only like 1 point difference. At level 2, it's a 2 point difference. At level 4, it's a 2 point difference. At level 5, it's a 3 point difference. So you're really not that much stronger than monk. You're about equivalent, but you're not that much better. So if we go all the way down, you'll notice that at 17th level, you're only getting 2 additional points of damage on average or on the first round, and then you're only increasing your damage by around 8. Less than like 7 to 8 points of damage over the course of 3 rounds. So overall, the Pugilist matches up with the melee monk, which in the optimization community is seen as kind of not the bare minimum, but the absolute minimum in order to be an unarmed fighter. Like, this is the bottom of the barrel unarmed fighter. This is with no subclasses, this is with no additional features, this is just pure melee with no magic items, no subclasses, no additional bonuses and damage included, just raw punching power. So you'll notice that the monk isn't that far off from the pugilist, and that's not that good. Now, if we go over to the most optimal build for a monk, which is the gun monk or the gunk, you'll notice here that it actually increases from a 2.5 to a 6.5. That's because we're using a musket. As you will see, I will link a video to Pack Tactics Gunk video in the description below if you want to check out his reasoning for the gunk. But generally speaking, if an artificer can do the things an artificer can do, a DM should be allowed to let monks use guns. So this is assuming at level 1 we're taking Gunner. And that's because Gunner gives us the ability of using firearms. And if we look at the monk, we can actually use the optional feature at level 2, the dedicated weapon, in order for it to become a martial weapon. Or a monk weapon, I apologize. So we will notice here it's actually quite lower damage because we don't have this as a monk weapon yet. Because monk weapons can only be weapons that we're proficient. Oh, actually, correction. I am correct. So, since monk weapons can be any weapon that we're proficient in, and we're now proficient in firearms, we still get that benefit. Okay, fantastic. So, what we do here is we take the average musket damage, which is 6.5 because it's 12. It is a D12 for the musket. You add 3 for dexterity. You multiply by 0.65. But then, because you don't have access to the monk's optional features of focused aim or key field attack yet, we are not going to account for that yet. So you'll notice here that we actually use 2.5 plus 3 plus times 0.65 for the unarmed strike at the second one because we don't have that. And of course we're going to do that until we reach level 5, in which we can actually start doing some real damage. So you'll notice here that the gunk actually does more damage than both the monk and the pugilist. The pugilist does about 1 point less damage and 2 points, and it actually does 2 more points of damage than the monk. But the gunk has the advantage here because it actually does 8 more points of damage over 3 rounds than the normal monk and 4 over the pugilist. And this is just with one weapon attack. Once we get to level 2, we actually have to use the same calculation, except we're doing 2 blows because now we have flurry of blows. But once again, because we only have 2 key points, we can only do this equation for the first 2 rounds of combat. Once we get to the third round, it's going to be this. So we would take 13.325 for the first round, multiply it by 2 since we can use it for 2 rounds, and then we would just add 9.75 since we're just using an attack plus a bonus action punch, which gives us the average DPR of 36.4, which is both better than the monk and the pugilist. By the pugilist, not by much. Now, at level 3, we can actually use the 13.325 by 3 times because we have 3 key points now. So we're actually getting a bigger increase to our damage, meaning now we're actually 6 points ahead of the pugilist and 7 ahead of the monk. Now, once we reach level 4, this is where we're going to take the sharpshooter feat. So you'll notice here that the sharpshooter feat gives me a plus 10 to damage, but it gives me a minus 5. So each number on the die equates to a 0.5 negation. So if you have a 0.65 chance to hit, you would subtract 0.25 if you have a minus 5 to hit. So that's giving you a 0.4, but since the sharpshooter feat doesn't equate to punches, it doesn't affect that. So you do 6.5 plus 13 times 0.4, but then you would add the unarmed strikes from Flurry of Blows, which gives you an average DPR of 14.95, which is about on par with the Pugilist at this point. And then we go into the 3 rounds, which gives us 44.85. Now, at level 5, this is where it gets better. Because at this point, we've had to use the punches. We don't have a choice. But at level 5, when we finally get focused aim, I did the math based on using a single point, a single key point. So at level 5, we have 5 key points, meaning we could spend 1 point to increase it from a 40% chance to hit to a 50% chance, because, once again, focused aim, for every key point you spend, you get a +2 to the attack roll. So if we go back to what I said earlier, for every 1 point on the die, it equates to a 0.5% chance to hit, or 0.05%, meaning that there's a 10% increase in chance to hit when you use 1 key point, which is why it goes from a 0.4 to a 0.5. So we would take 6.5 plus 13 multiplied by 0.5 because you're using 1 key point, and then we would multiply that by 2 because you're going to be using 2 key points for both your attack and extra attack with your musket. And then, because you did that, you now can use your key fueled attack because you spent a key point as part of your action. So now you can attack as a bonus action using an unarmed strike or a monk weapon for free. So at level 5, you're now dealing 6.5 plus 13 because you're using sharpshooter again, but this is also assuming that you're not going to be using your aimed shot for your bonus action attack because you don't have enough key points for that. So at level 5, you can use this twice. So you can increase your chance to hit for your attack and extra attack for 2 rounds before you have 1 key point left. So at level 5, I did the calculations for 27.3 times 2, but then I did the calculations again, going 6.5 plus 13 times 0.5, but then I added 6.5 plus 13 times 0.4 times 2 because I'm shooting twice with my musket, but I'm only getting the +2 to attack on the first hit because I'll be out of key points by that time, meaning I go from 40 at level 4 to 70.2 over the course of 3 rounds, which is greater than both of the monk and the pugilist. The pugilist is falling behind by 4, and the monk is falling behind by 12. Now, if we go on to level 6, this increases now, because now we can do this more than that. So prior at level 5, we only had 5 key points. Now we have 6, meaning we can use it on both attacks now on round 3. So you do the calculation again. So you would basically just take 27.3 and multiply it by 3, because for your attack and your extra attack, that's 2 key points, and you are level 6 and you have 6 key points. So for 3 rounds, you're spending all 6 of your key points to give you a +2 on both your attack and extra attack, which gives you an average DPR of 81.9. At this point, this is the same damage. The gunk at level 6 does the same damage as a normal unarmed monk at level 17, and the same damage that a level 11 pugilist can do over the course of 3 rounds. Now, if we go to level 7, this is when we can start doing the aim shot on your attack, extra attack, and on the first round of combat, you can actually use 1 point on your bonus action attack, which is why the calculation here is going to be 6.5 plus 13 times 0.5 times 3. But since that's only for the first attack, I then took 27.3 from the previous level and just doubled that and added it to 29.25, and that got me 83.85. Now, if we go to level 8, you'll notice that it went from a 0.5 to a 0.6, and that's because at level 8, we will take the feat that allows you to get archery fighting style, giving you an additional +2. So you're basically already back up to a 0.6 chance to hit, which is only 1 number off from being what we started with at 0.65. And we're still getting that additional 10 points of damage. So really, Sharpshooter is just giving us a -1 to hit at this point as opposed to a -5. So at this point, we still don't have enough points to do all of our attacks, so we'll just do this calculation twice. So we'll take 35.1, multiply it by 2, and then we will just do this calculation again, except we'll do 6.5 plus 13 times 0.6 times 2, and then we'll do 6.5 plus 13 times 0.5, because once again, the 0.5 is because we're taking disadvantage, or taking a -5 from Sharpshooter, but then because we got a +2 bonus from Archery, it goes up to a 0.5, which gives us the 103.35. This is more damage at level 8 than both of these classes combined. Like, both of these classes, they can't deal that amount of damage, even at 20th level. They lose. So then, of course, after that, we will increase. We'll just keep going until we get to our next ability score increase, which will be at level 12, which means our average DPR, instead of being 35.1, now goes to 36.9. And since we have enough key points to use one key point on our attack, extra attack, and bonus action attack from key field attack for 3 rounds, that's just going to be the same calculation from now on. So then, with 36.9 times 3, that's 110.7 damage over the course of 3 rounds. And then finally at level 16, we increase our dexterity again to 5, giving us 38.7 DPR, and then a total of 116.1 damage over the course of 3 rounds. Now, this doesn't mean... This may not seem like much, because this is the most optimal build, and this is not going to be indicative of what every monk is going to be playing. However, if we go to here, which is the what baseline should I use by the Form of Dread, we'll see that the Warlock baseline, it does beat the Warlock baseline in terms of DPR by a significant margin, because 5.85, 8.45, it beats it out pretty easily. 36, though it does start to fall off in the first round DPR right around 11th level. It's at 11th level where they actually meet. But then the Pugilist actually falls behind at level 16, because at level 16 that's when the Warlock gets their additional beam. So once that is established, it does beat it out early on, but it kind of stagnates at around 11th level, which is fine. But then again, you also got to remember, the Warlock is for people whose primary contribution is not damage. The only thing the Pugilist can do is damage. It really only has grappling, and that's about it. So what we really need to do is we actually need to go to the fighter baseline, and it loses. It loses very, very badly. So at early levels, it doesn't seem that bad. It's 8.45 versus 9.75, only a 1 point damage difference. And then it may seem like it actually beats it, because at level 2, it beats it out by 2 points. However, once you reach level 4, you'll see here the fighter has 15.778125 damage per round. Meanwhile, the Pugilist has only 14.625. And then at level 5, it actually gets more because it gets its extra attack. So again, it beats it out by 2 points. And then it just gets better and better, because this is assuming that you're playing a fighter with 16 dexterity, you take Crossbow Expert, and you take Sharpshooter at level 4, and then you rush dex afterwards. So you're taking Crossbow Expert at level 1, and then you're taking Sharpshooter at level 4, which is where the giant increase comes from. And then you're getting increased in dex each time. But this is also assuming you're taking the archery fighting style, I would assume. And action surge, and this is an assumption of 2 4-round combats per short rest. So the fact that the Pugilist is already falling behind by level 6, because it has 2 less damage, actually 4 less damage, 6, it's 6 less damage, I apologize. And even by level 20, it's dealing half the damage of the fighter. This is terrible. This needs a buff, because if a baseline fighter with no subclass and just 2 feats can beat your class because there's no unarmed feats, there's something wrong here. That's why even in the new monk playtest, they gave the monk basically the Pugilist DPR charts because it has the same damage. So basically, the monk is going to go from what it is now to the Pugilist, meaning the Pugilist is now irrelevant. And the whole haymaker damage per round thing doesn't help it because you're losing out on damage because you're having to do it at disadvantage. And once again, this is assuming at like 14th level you're already done with the game. Like this is pretty much end game at this point. If we go to 14th level Pugilist, that's 27.3 versus the fighters 42. You're basically doing half the damage. So the fact that your Pugilist class that is spec'd into unarmed strikes is weaker than the weakest fighter that you can make. You can't call yourself a damage dealer if you can't beat a straight class fighter. You can't. And that's why Monk is only seen as better in the Gunk format, because the Gunk out damages the fighter for a little bit, but then it starts to lag behind. Right around like 11th level in terms of DPR. But it does start to make up for it a little bit, not by much though. So, Benjamin Huffman, if you yourself are watching these videos by some miracle, you're looking at these numbers, I would suggest giving the Pugilist another look at, a possible revision, maybe increasing the amount of damage that your unarmed strikes can do, give them some kind of feat in the book that actually allows them, because currently there is no feat in this. Yes, there's equipment, but there's no feat. It's straight up just weapons, and then nothing else. And then there's stat blocks. You need to give them some kind of feat to increase their DPR, because this being the equivalent of the monk, but then losing out to Gunk and a base fighter with only 2 feats, it's unacceptable. It needs to be better. But with that out of the way, I would like to thank you all so much for joining me on this journey of going over the Pugilist class and all of its subclasses, as well as its arguably very mediocre math, as you were able to see in this video. If you like this video or any other videos that I've made, please leave a like, comment, and tell me how I can improve on this series, what you would like to see next, or possible thoughts on the class. Maybe share this to Benjamin Huffman if you know him personally. Like I said before, the video for the Gunk by Pack Tactics will be linked in the description below. And until next time, where I'm going to be covering, I don't know yet, possible revision for the cooking rules, my member of the community. I'll probably go over that next. It's not going to have much math involved with it, mainly just flavor, but that'll probably be the next one in the next episode of Homebrew Review. And I will see you all next time. Laters.